Call to order the November 5th meeting of the Brentwood Board of Aldermen. If you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, roll call, please.
Mayor Thornton,
Here.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Here.
Alderman Kramer,
Present.
Alderman Leahy,
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill, Alderman Plufka,
Here.
Alderwoman Sims, and Alderman Wiggy.
Here. All right, sounds like we got a quorum. Let's see, item number 4 on tonight's agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening? Alderman Leahy.
Your Honor, on item 10F, street lighting additions, can I pull that from the consent agenda? And I believe it would go under new business?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So we'll make 10F, we will put under 12C.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, is there any objection to approval by acclamation? Seeing none, it'll be so approved. Item number 5 on tonight's agenda is, get back up there, announcements, appointments, proclamations, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, tonight, so we've got 2 things. Both of them relate to the Board of Adjustment. The first one is Chaz McDaniel, who served on the Board of Adjustment for the past 2 years, has asked to be removed from the Board of Adjustment, and he's resigned. So I want to take this opportunity to thank him for his service. My understanding is the Board of Adjustment will have a little award for him at their next meeting. And then I'm asking the board to approve a appointment to the Board of Adjustment, and it's Ryan Marshall. Ryan is the son of former Alderman Mike Marshall, and he is from Ward 2, and I think he'd make a great addition to the Board of Adjustment. So I'm making that appointment and asking the Board of Aldermen to approve the appointment. So I'd take a motion to approve the appointment.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Moved and seconded, we appoint Ryan Marshall to the Board of Adjustment. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill, Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims, and Alderman Wiggy.
All right, thanks very much. Ryan, congratulations. We look forward to seeing you on the Board of Adjustment. Thank you. Let's see, we have a public hearing tonight. We have a public hearing on a conditional use permit for the McDonald's on Hanley Road. My understanding is they're planning to implement a dual drive-through lane and do some landscaping and so forth. So we have a public hearing on that tonight. And with that, I'm going to gavel in the public hearing. If anyone would care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen on the proposed conditional use permit, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and state your piece. Now would be the time. All right, well, hearing crickets, I'm going to go ahead and gavel out the public hearing. That's the public hearing on the changes to McDonald's. There'll be a bill later here in the evening, I think, that covers the actual approval of the conditional use permit, or the proposed approval of the conditional use permit. Item number 7 on tonight's agenda is citizens' comments. If anyone would care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen on any topic, you'll have at least 3 minutes to address the board. All you have to do is, again, state your name and address for the record, please. Would anyone care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen? And again with the crickets. All right, we're going to move along to item number 8 on tonight's agenda is reports of the mayor and the Board of Aldermen. Under my report tonight, I have a couple of things. The first is I want to thank the Brentwood Bound Task Force. They were organized 2 open houses this weekend on Thursday evening and one on Saturday morning. They were both very well attended. I was actually quite surprised. I think we probably, between the 2 of them, had as many as maybe 150 people show up. And I think a lot of good questions were asked. I think there was a lot of good information that was gleaned. And as I said at the at the open houses, the biggest thing I want is for people to get involved, right? This is a big project. It's got a lot of moving parts, and it affects a lot of people. And whether you're in favor of it or whether you don't think it's such a good idea doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is that you get involved and you play a part in the process, because that's the only way it's going to be successful, in my opinion, whether no matter how it goes. If you have concerns about the project and you keep them to yourself, and then after the project's finished, you come forward and you say, "Hey, this is really bad." Well, where were you? I was there on Saturday. Where were you? And so that's the kind of thing that I think we need to avoid. So I would encourage everyone who has even the slightest bit of interest in this project to talk to friends, talk to neighbors, come to as many of the public meetings as you can, get involved in one way or another in the process, and make whatever concerns that you have heard. And I think it'll be a very successful project that way. Other things that I have to say tonight is more or less an announcement. Our Veterans Day observance will be on Veterans Day, the 11th of November, at the Brentwood Recreation Complex at 1 p.m. We'll have a short ceremony. We will hear from one of the veterans, one of our employees who is also a veteran, and then we'll follow the ceremony with a light lunch. So please come out to that, honor our men and women who have served our country. It's a great opportunity, and as far as I know, it's the only one that's actually, well, no, that's not true. It's one of the few that are actually taking place on Veterans Day. Right. So please come out and do that. I think it's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed it every year that we've done it. The other is the Century Foundation. As you know, next year is our century year. Brentwood was founded in December of 1919, and so we're celebrating all next year the 100th anniversary of Brentwood. And related to that, there's a whole host of activities. And one of the things that I would like to talk about in particular is an opportunity for local businesses, citizens groups to get together and sponsor various activities and or projects that are related to the Century Foundation. So if you have a local business and want to get involved in the Century Foundation in a more lasting way, I would encourage you to talk to Lisa Kirkemeyer, our Director of Planning, or Steve Lockmiller, who is serving on the Century Foundation Board, and talk to them about what opportunities are available to get involved in that great celebration. It's going to be a lot of fun, and like I said, it's going to last all year long next year, so it'll be a great opportunity. With that, I'm going to pass the mic to Alderman Dimmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of things. The first is Ways and Means Committee meeting. We didn't hold it last week because we didn't have the budget. We do have it now. It was delivered to your houses on Friday night. I would request, especially the members on the committee, use this time to read it over, because we might just only get one meeting at Ways and Means to deal with the budget. It just kind of depends on everybody's schedule. So hopefully on the 14th at 6 o'clock, everyone will have had a chance to really go through the budget and come with some good questions, some suggestions. If you have any questions before then, I would encourage you to reach out to Bola or to Karen and get those answered. And that's not limited to the committee members. I'd also ask anybody on the board to take a look at that. If you can make it on the meeting 14th, great. If you can't, email your questions to us on the committee, and we'll do our best to get answers for you or to address your concerns. The second area is, I don't know if anybody realizes it, but tomorrow is Election Day. And I would encourage everyone to show up tomorrow and do your research in advance. I looked at the sample ballot. It's rather lengthy. Do your research. You can do it tonight. The League of Women Voters has a good explanation on all the items, as well as the Post-Dispatch. So if you do your homework, it should make getting through the line tomorrow a little bit easier, but it is going to be a long line, so be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to mention I voted absentee because I'm going to be quite busy tomorrow. So, but get out and vote. It's very important. I also wanted to take the opportunity to mention the Board of Adjustment. I don't know that a lot of people know what the Board of Adjustment does, and so our Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial commission that looks at variances from our zoning code and determines cases related to our local zoning. I wanted to thank also the current members, Greg Reinders, who's the chairman, Jared Ballant, Adam Summer, Keith Slusser, Bob Boley, Rich Schaefer, Ryan Marshall, and Scott Stinson. I wanted to thank them for their service as well while we were on the topic of the Board of Adjustment. And with that, Alderman Kramer.
No report at this time, Your Honor.
Alderman Leahy.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Ward 3 meeting for the month of November will be Tuesday night, 27th at 7 p.m. up here in the council chambers. All are invited. Thank you, sir.
All right. Alderman Lockmiller.
Thank you, Mayor. To piggyback on your report, earlier this year, the Brentwood Century Foundation started up a donor committee and to go out and seek donations for the 2019 celebration. With the help of Janet Levy, our communications director, they put together the literature that's in front of you right now. If you look at the smaller brochure, this is the brochure to sponsor individual events that'll go on during 2019. So for instance, if, let's say you're an elected official running for re-election next April, you could
We
sponsor
got
for
at least 4 of them in here, don't we?
Yes, we do. You could sponsor for $500 a portion of the Brentwood Trivia Night in January. Or let's say you're a small business, say an insurance company here in Brentwood. You could sponsor the Brentwood Century Foundation, the party of the century, that is, the children's party for $5,000, and it lists the benefits all in here. So that's kind of geared towards individual, family, and small businesses. The larger brochure is geared towards large corporate donors located here in Brentwood. The packet starts out with a little bit of the first 100 years of Brentwood, then goes on to the future of Brentwood and some projects we would like to see. If you go to the last page, there's a pocket, and in that pocket, with the help of Eric Grunfelder, our Parks and Rec director, there are several items that a corporate sponsor could either put their name to, sponsor, or donate money to have done. One being the Century Plaza, which we'd like to see done in front of the rec center. And this packet is not just for the year 2019. This foundation will stay in place and can be used going forward for years to come. So if anybody's looking to donate, contact, or has any leads into some of the corporate donors here in town, you can contact the Brentwood Century Foundation at brentwood100.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes, the library has programs and would like to share them and encourage you to encourage people to come. The first one is for young people. Shannon Messenger, an author, will be here next Tuesday in the evening. And the Sunday before Thanksgiving is an author with a cookbook with square pies, which are a dump pie, in that you don't have to roll things out and mix them up, you dump them in. So she's going to demonstrate this, and there is a cost involved, but the cost gives you the cookbook and a chance to sample some of these pies that she'll be demonstrating. So that will be Sunday, November 18th at the Rec Center from 2 to 4 p.m. So go to the library or go online if you're interested in either and sign up.
All right, thank you. Alderman Plefka.
Thank you. In an effort to keep Alderman Dimmitt busy throughout the week of November 12th, November 13th, we will have the Ward 1 meeting here at 6:30. You'll get I imagine, a sneak preview of what's going to go on at Ways and Means the following night, and we'll also talk about Brentwood Bound and any other issues that Ward 1 wants to discuss.
Ward 1, November 13th.
Yep, 6:30 here.
All right. Alderwoman Sims.
No report.
And Alderman Weggie. No report. All right, very good. Okay, under the city administrator's report this evening, we have an update on the Brentwood Bound project.
In your packet this evening, we have a November 5th, 2018 City Administrator update for Brentwood Bound. As always, there are 3 categories: the investment cost, the direct project cost, and the indirect or sunk cost. In the investment cost, there have been no added expense from October 15th. So to date, we have spent $707,270, and $0.37. Under direct project cost, since October 15th, we have spent an additional $6,125, and those costs are attributed to alter surveys for two of the properties the city has interest in acquiring, 2735 Bompart, 2745 Bompart. We have also spent funds on mailing postcards to all Brentwood residents for the two open houses that we had this past weekend. Then also under indirect or sunk cost, since October 15th of 2008, we have spent an additional $6,170 for Phase 1, Phase 2 environmental site assessment for a number of properties that the city also has interest in acquiring. So total amount spent to date is $688,569.47. And for the one previous to that, the direct project cost total expense to date is $1,276,589.12.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the city administrator? All right, anything else?
That's it, thank you.
All right, let's see, next up, we have the consent agenda. There's one thing on the consent agenda tonight that, I'm sorry, I thought I had looked at this, but I missed it. So I'm actually going to remove item 10G from the consent agenda, and I'm going to place it under new business under 12D. So I'm going to go ahead and do that since it's up to the mayor. If something comes off the consent agenda, I'm going to make the request and approve it myself. And I'll explain when I get there. When we get to 12D, I'll explain it. I don't think it'll increase our meeting length at a great deal. So on the consent agenda this evening, we have approval of the minutes from these September meetings of 17 and 27. Liquor license application for Bed Bath & Beyond, and a liquor license application for Han Lao Restaurant, which is over on Strassner, which I'm looking forward to the opening with great anticipation. So that's what's on the consent agenda tonight. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board approve the consent agenda as submitted in the agenda for this evening. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill. Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
And Alderman Wiggy.
Yes. All right, item number 11 on the agenda is old business. Tonight we have resolution number 1116. If I recall correctly, this resolution came up, was discussed, and then it was referred back to committee. And I assume since it's back here in front of us, we've been to committee and we're ready to take it up again. So I'd start by asking for a motion to adopt resolution 1116.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board adopt resolution 1116. Is there any discussion? Alderman Plufka, this came out of your committee, so would you like to start?
Sure. This was referred back to Public Safety Committee because of a concern that was raised at the last full Board of Aldermen meeting as to whether or not the city of Ladue and the city of Brentwood shared a common interest in the improvement on McKnight Road specifically. We share that road, as everybody knows, ownership-wise, and it made some sense logically to get together and see if we couldn't collectively fund a traffic study to help us solve the problems that I think we all know exist on that stretch of road from Litzinger to Highway 64. We had the benefit of Dan Gummersheimer's counterpart and from the city of Ladue was kind enough to be there with us. She answered questions. She was very candid. She talked about the fact that, so on a couple of different points, one being we had talked about the notion of revisiting the ability to enhance the crosswalk at Sonora into Tillis Park with a sign that would actually light on command with LED embedded lights, not unlike the stop sign that's farther up the road on, near where York Drive and McKnight Road come together, and she expressed a willingness to do that. We also talked about the fact that the city of Ladue just recently put up for, I don't know if they did RFP yet. Did they do that yet? So they're interested in seeking folks that want to develop or redevelop the quarry area, which is to the south of Litzinger on McKnight Road. And the notion is that I think the action they took was they zoned it for mixed use, which would imply that it would be both retail and residential use, which would certainly impact traffic on McKnight Road. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about how we would try to draft this agreement so that we would truly be partners in this arrangement. There were a couple of clauses that were concerning to the aldermen here. One having to do with the fact that the way the work order was first written, it was clear that there was sort of a hierarchy involved and that Ladue sort of had last say, which wasn't reflected in the actual agreement, but was reflected in the work order. I think that's been changed out from the work order that's now been submitted. Additionally, there were some notion, a couple of different places where Ladue was given sort of the final say on which constituencies to seek opinions from, and they were sort of looked upon, at least in the work order, as the sort of the driving force of this agreement. And CBB explained at the meeting that the reason for that was that he really could only serve one client. He has both clients, but he really wanted to have a clear understanding of who he was answering to and things like that. However, with that being said, he said he would draft a more neutral work order, which I think is what he has done here. And so with that, I'll tell you my own feeling about it. I'm still not altogether convinced that we share similar visions for McKnight Road, and I am concerned that what is foremost in Ladue's mind has to do with the efficiency of traffic moving through that section of roadway rather than what I would consider to be my number one concern, and that is the safety of travel for the folks that live in the neighborhoods that abut that roadway. And I don't know that those two concepts are necessarily inconsistent with one another, but I also think that by the way this work order has been written, it leaves open the possibility that we're going to get recommendations that speak to one issue and not necessarily to the other. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Alderman Dimmitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As proposed to us, I'm opposed to this for a couple of reasons. The work order, the revised work order between CBB and the city of Ladue, paragraph 15, page 4, states that CBB is authorized to come up with 3 alternatives to reduce congestion and improve traffic flow. There are a number of different ways that you can improve traffic flow and reduce congestion. One is to widen McKnight. There's absolutely no way I would ever agree to widen McKnight. I think it's foolish for this city to spend 1 penny toward CBB if what they're going to do is come back to us and say, we think that you should widen McKnight. My suggestion is we go back to CBB and tell them you can come up with 3 suggestions, with the caveat being that none of them is to widen McKnight Road. I can tell you none of my constituents would be in favor of widening McKnight Road. They do want to reduce congestion and they want to improve traffic flow, but not that way. Secondly, the agreement between Ladue and Brentwood. Since I've been on this board, which is now over 3 years, we have been trying to address that crosswalk at Sonora and McKnight. And we get pushback from Ladue repeatedly, saying that there's nothing they can do. They don't like to have signs up on the Ladue side. You know what? They want us to sign off on this. We tell them they got to agree to put those signs up on the Ladue side of McKnight. We've looked into it. We've got these flashing crosswalk lights that can be activated by users. I've seen them in use. They're terrific. They draw a lot of attention to anybody in the crosswalk. And that's the problem that we have on that crosswalk. People do not stop. And we're going to get somebody hit. And we can put those up on our side. They can't stop us from doing it. But to really make it effective, Ladue needs to put it on their side of McKnight. So if they want us to contribute to the cost of this thing, we say, fine. But you are going to make a commitment in writing to put that sign in on the Ladue side of McKnight by a certain date. I don't care if it's the end of December, end of January. You can order this thing, get it installed in a matter of days. So with those two conditions, I will vote in favor of this. Without those, it's not going to get my support.
Should I take that as a motion to amend or just a suggestion to the board?
Suggestion to the board for right now.
All right, thank you. Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. With all due respect to all opposing and positive points of view regarding this particular proposal, I did get a chance to sit next to one of the partners there at CBB during the presentation of public safety. I was heartened by the intent I felt that Ladue had in reaching out with this study proposal. I don't see any harm in the information. That's basically what it is. It's information. It's a new data set. It's a new sampling of information from all parties concerned, including MoDOT and the cities, the residents. And I was also heartened by the fact that it appeared clear at the meeting that the drivers of the road will also have an opportunity to contribute their points of view, of which, Mr. Mayor, this has brought up a couple times, but about 21,000 cars travel that road every day.
I'm counting 26 per day now.
Okay.
26,000.
All right. Which is about half of what Brentwood Boulevard carries every day with just 2 lanes.
A little less than half, yeah.
I understand Brentwood Boulevard has about 45,000 cars a day. So if you look at Phase 5, item number 22 of the revised proposal, the work order from CBB, it does make clear that the City of Ladue and Brentwood staff to reach a consensus on the preferred alternative is set as part of the agreement. If no consensus can be reached, the documentation of the project will reflect that fact. So this does not compel a decision. It does not compel any kind of bias one way or the other. It does not take into account developments. It simply is an opportunity to look at this very popular and at sometimes congested road and look at possibilities. That's all it does. And I'm in favor of it. I don't see any harm in seeing the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Leahy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not in favor of this potential resolution. I think that the city of Brentwood has a legitimate concern on McKnight, and we have two. The Sonora crosswalk, we would like to make it safer, and the stop sign at York and McKnight. And I don't see that in this potential study that those two things would ever be approved to be put or left in. I think the study's going to come back after we spend $10,000 to say not to put stop signs in and not to put the extra crosswalk in. And thus, we're spending $10,000 to be told what we want done isn't going to be agreeable. So I think we just save the money and have the sidebar conversation with the city of Ladue and not spend the $20,000 for a study and see if they at least can get on the same page with us. Their concern is also that they don't like the traffic from the Winter Wonderland type arrangement. A month-long event, we're talking a full year's of activity. So I do think the two parties are not on the same page, and thus the resolution, I don't see getting a bang for our buck. So I'm not in favor of passing this one.
All right, thank you. Alderman Plufka.
Thanks. Alderman Kramer brought up a point that I had failed to mention when I first described. We actually don't agree. I know Alderman Kramer's position is that he would like very much, and it's reflected in the work order, that the drivers of that road would be a constituency that would be drawn upon to make recommendations. I'm not really in favor of that. I really could care less what the drivers in Webster Groves think about the condition of McKnight Road between Litzinger and Highway 64. I think the only two constituencies that matter are the constituencies that own that section of road and have neighborhoods that back up to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the resolution? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, please. Vote is, a vote of yes is in favor of the resolution and to move forward with the study. A vote of no would be against the resolution and presumably to not move forward with at least our part of the study. All right, go ahead.
Alderman Demmett,
No.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
No.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill. No. Alderman Plufka,
No.
Alderwoman Sims,
No.
and Alderman Wiggy.
I count 2 yea and 6 nay. So the motion to adopt the resolution will fail, and we'll take it from there. Under old business, item 11B is bill number 6223. Mr. City Attorney, could I have the second reading of bill number 6223 by title only, please?
Bill number 6223, second reading and consideration for adoption and ordinance amending Brentwood City Code relating to the order of business and agendas for Board of Aldermen meetings.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to perfect.
Your Honor, motion to perfect Bill 6223 into ordinance form?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's 6225 on my agenda. Is that correct?
No, it's 6223.
223, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. I've clicked on the wrong thing. I apologize. Go ahead. So moved, did I hear a second? Moved and seconded that the board perfects Bill 6223. Is there any discussion on the bill? Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor, in the interest of clarity, could you gave a pretty good explanation for how this came about at the last meeting, I thought. Or maybe you had an idea about it.
I think our city attorney actually did that.
Okay, let's do that. Yes, sir. Just anything brief about it, how this came about?
I thought it would be prudent to import to the city code the provisions for mayoral veto of legislation, because we didn't have it in the code for people to have readily available. And in the process, extended it for resolutions that pertain to the expenditure of funds. So we put resolutions and ordinances on an equal footing for that.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any other discussion on the bill? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Demmett,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Wiggy.
Yes.
Bill number 6223 passes as upon signature of the mayor becomes ordinance number 4861.
All right. Under new business this evening, we have 4 items. Number 12A is Bill 6224. Mr. City Attorney, could we have the first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6224, first reading, an ordinance authorizing and approving the terms of purchase for the real property located at 8302 and 8304 Manchester Road.
Thank you. Let's see, this is Lisa?
Attorney Mark Murray from our
Well, I saw
county.
Mark walk in, but I didn't want to make assumptions. Mr. Murray, could you come forward and give the board some information on this?
No more. Who's next?
Okay, all right.
Quite
Good
exciting.
evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Board of Aldermen. We've been working on the acquisition of these parcels for quite some time. These are 2 parcels off of Manchester Road, behind the old Colt Safety Building, was it, Lisa, that got demolished and torn down. The same owner owns 3 parcels in a row. The frontage is 8,300, and then the rear 2 parcels are 8302 and 8304. And we're asking to acquire these in connection with the flood mitigation project. We're only going to acquire the 2 rear properties, but the city will have an easement to get out from the rear properties to Manchester Road. And as part of the deal, there is going to be a short-term lease back through the end of April of next year on essentially for free base rent to the current owner, so he can kind of transition his operations elsewhere. So That's it in a nutshell. The purchase price is $1,750,000 for both parcels, and that includes the easement. And again, I mentioned the lease back through April of next year.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Murray? Alderman Leahy.
Mark, my question is with this easement, is there going to be a roadway put in on the 8300 property? And if so, who pays for that that road?
No, it's unlikely. Right now, there's a road to get back to 8302 and 8304. There's an existing easement, and not to get into too much nerdy lawyer real estate talk, I'm not sure it's valid because you can't grant yourself an easement over your own property, but we're going to look at that and see if we can get insurance, title insurance on that. But if not, the contract requires them to give us a new easement for that. But essentially, we're going to keep a 30-foot wide strip to get from Manchester back to the properties.
So eventually, we could be asked to put a roadway through that property so that we could get back to these two.
The road actually exists. So the physical road actually exists. So we're not going to have to, I don't think we're going to have to do much. Right now, the way it works, the proposed easement would make cost of maintenance repair roughly 2/3 the rear two parcels, 1/3 the frontage, just based on the way that works out. But the other part of this is when the project moves forward and the Brentwood acquires other ways of accessing the property besides Manchester Road,
Then
you can say, I don't need the easement anymore. It's all your responsibility, front parcel owner. We don't want to use it. We don't need it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Alderwoman Sims.
Could you, this can be the Reader's Digest version, but just elaborate a little bit on as to the price and why it's a wise decision to do this as opposed to alternative ways of acquiring this property, litigation or otherwise?
Sure. The primary alternative way of doing it is condemnation. We did get appraisals. The appraisals, I want to say, were about $1,460,000 for both parcels. All three properties went on the market, I think, this last summer, and they originally were asking, I want to say, they made an offer to us, I think, of $2.7 million for all three parcels. We said we really don't need the frontage. We really need the back two parcels. And for what seems like an eternity was probably 4 months, we played negotiations back and forth where we kind of narrowed it. We went up some, they came down some. We went up some, they came down some. And finally, the way it shook out was we thought that they would accept either $1.8 million and then pay the city something resembling fair market rent for that short period of time after closing they were there, or we would pay them $1.75 million and they would get the free base rent for that short period of time while they're there. And so that's the basis in the history of the negotiation. The other alternative is condemnation. And so the condemnation, typically, we would have probably offered $1.46 million. We probably would have not gotten anywhere with that. We would have then sued to condemn the property. That would have gone through the court system, legal expenses, legal fees. Then the next step is once you get your order of condemnation, the commissioners are appointed by the court. And the commissioners are three disinterested residents of St. Louis County, one of whom has to be a broker or an appraiser by statute in St. Louis and St. Louis City. I think Jackson County too, but that's neither here nor there. And then the commissioners go out and they look at the property. So the commissioners have complete discretion to award whatever they feel like. They could award $1.46 million. They could award $2.3 million if that's what the property owner suggests, or $2.2 million. They could split the difference and go right down the middle, which is roughly where we wound up with the $1.75 million. Or they could just do whatever number they wanted. They could do $500,000 or $10 million. Those would be unlikely. Normally, they go with either the owners or the condemning authority's value, or they split it in the middle someplace. So this provides certainty It also avoids the possibility of paying relocation expenses and providing relocation assistance to the property owner, which is an additional expense. The relocation's on top of and over and above what you pay in the condemnation. And the other risk, it's not a huge risk with the condemnation, but it's a kind of a cost of doing business with the condemnation is, let's say the commissioners came back at $2 million. Each party would have the right to appeal that and take that to a jury trial somewhere down the road, time-wise, which would also incur additional legal expenses to do that trial. And essentially, it's called filing exceptions. And so the property could say, hey, $2 million was too low, I really should have got $2.5 million. Or the city could say, $2 million was way too high, it should have been $1.68 million, whatever it was. So it's a way to provide certainty rather than going through the condemnation process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm
Any
sorry for the long-winded explanation.
Lawyers get paid by the word, don't they? Alderman Waggy.
Just so I understand, so the front property, the 8,300, that would still be owned by the person. Does buying the two properties behind it cause the valuation of that property to go down in any way, shape, or form? I know it's an empty field now.
Not, I mean, this is my amateur, valuation. I'm not an appraiser, but I don't think it'll have much of an effect on the frontage, because right now there purports to be an existing easement across the frontage anyway to our parcels in the rear, and I have to think that a purchaser evaluating the frontage will look why we purchased it and the kind of good intentions of what we plan to do, and I just don't see it having a bad effect on the frontage.
Do you know what that front property, did we appraise that as well as part of the
I don't believe we did because it wasn't ever part of the project. I want to say that they offered to sell us all three parcels for 2.7, could have been 2.8 million, and we landed on 1.75 million for the back two. So figure he probably he probably has his mind it's worth 900,000 or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Murphy? Nope. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have this one on the agenda for a first and second reading, so we're going to go ahead and, Mr. City Attorney, could we have the second reading of bill number 6224 by title only, please?
Bill number 6224, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance authorizing and approving the terms of purchase for the real property located at 8302 and 8304 Manchester Road.
Thank you. Would entertain a motion to perfect.
Motion to perfect bill number 6224 in the ordinance form.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we perfect bill 6224 into ordinance form. Is there any discussion? Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. Ordinarily, according to Robert's Rules of Order, we don't normally give descriptions or explanations for our voting when the voting takes place, one way or the other. So I did want to comment that I have a pretty distinct history of not voting in favor of cities, especially our city in particular, not paying above the appraisal value. In this case, we're about $250,000 over appraisal. I know that we've discussed this at length, but I wanted to explain my position. I'll be voting against bill number 6224.
Any other discussion on bill 6224? Seeing none. So roll call, please.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
Alderman Waggy,
Yes.
and Alderman Kramer.
No.
Okay, by a vote of 7-1, I count that bill 6224 will become an ordinance whenever I sign it. What's the ordinance number?
Bill number 6224 becomes ordinance number 4862.
All right, thank you. Item number 12B is a bill 6225 for a conditional use permit. Mr. City Attorney, can we have the first reading of bill 6225 by title only, please?
6225, first reading, an ordinance amending ordinance 3619, which granted a conditional use permit and approved site development plan to McDonald's Corporation for property numbered 1595 South Hanley Road.
All right, thank you, and I'm going to guess that Ms. Kirkemeyer has information for the board on this one.
Good evening. So the public hearing that was earlier this evening is related to the preparation of this bill. And this bill would amend ordinance number 3619, which was actually approved by a board back in 1998. And this previous ordinance adopted or approved the plans and the conditional use permit for the McDonald's restaurant that's located at 1595 South Hanley Road. So tonight, again, the request is to amend that original ordinance. McDonald's is wanting to make some significant improvements to their store on Hanley Road. The improvements, the primary improvement's going to be the addition of another drive-through lane. So there'll be dual drive-through lanes through the site. This would help certainly with queuing, avoiding the stacking that sometimes happens on Hanley Road. And other improvements also are related to some landscaping, change out of all the exterior elevations that would be now with the corporate rebranding that's happening with McDonald's. And then also there is a major interior remodel as part of this project as well. So because of the drive-through turn lanes and there would be a loss of 3 parking spaces on site, there was certainly a traffic study that was recommended to be conducted by staff. That traffic report came back, and the traffic report had indicated that actually the improvements with the dual drive-through lane would be a significant improvement for the functioning of the site, and also that the loss of 3 parking spaces, still considering that 70% of the sales of McDonald's are actually through drive-through sales, that there was still plenty of parking left at 55 spaces to accommodate the McDonald's store. That parking equation, by the way, just if you're curious about that, it was in the staff report as well. But there are 32, that would leave 32 parking spaces still on the site. And then McDonald's, since its beginning, has leased 23 spaces from Home Depot. Home Depot has plenty of surplus parking. That lease arrangement with the parking is still, it's been executed, it's still in place. So don't think that would be a particular problem as well. This went through Planning and Zoning Commission. They approved it with a vote of 7 ayes, 0 nay. And then also I wanted to just let you know that we do have the engineer for the project in the audience tonight. Mr. Polk is here representing McDonald's, but I can certainly answer any questions you may have.
Alderman Plefka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So am I reading this correctly? The signage for ordering is in the area of where the 2 lanes are actually separated by some middle landscaping or something in between, right?
Right, there'll
Am I
be a
reading that right?
separation between the lanes.
And that, okay, but it's beyond where they split. It's actually in the area where there's some separation between the 2 lanes themselves.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the only question I really had for you was there any concern expressed with regard to extending the crosswalk now across 2 lanes of people going into the queue to get into the entrance of the restaurant from the north?
Actually, staff brought that up originally, because we always do an internal plan review meeting just with department heads, and we did bring that up as well. It's been functioning, though, as well as we know there hasn't been any reported concerns or even accidents there. So I think it's still functioning well, and will
Okay.
continue to do so.
There hasn't been any reports of like pedestrians being hit or that kind of thing?
No.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Leahy.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm looking at the 3rd drawing in the layouts that they have. I'm looking at the opening off of Hanley Road going into the McDonald's. I do not know what the width is of that current opening, but with the 2 cars line that you're now proposing, I don't believe there's enough room to get a car in there to get over to the parking spaces. So I would fear that you would stack more on Hanley Road.
So I guess I will ask Mr. Polk for a clarification
Please.
on the width, but we had looked at that, so it's, if you want to come on up, that's fine.
Good evening. My name is Bob Polk. I'm a principal at Farnsworth Group representing McDonald's. There was an exhibit prepared with the anticipated stacking at the peak hours, and I don't know if you've seen that exhibit, but it does not stack dual lanes of cars all the way back to Hanley. So there is still room for cars to enter the site and bypass any stacking that may be occurring at the dual order station.
It is my understanding that your request to go to a 2-lane drive-through is because the current 1 lane does get stacked back towards Hanley.
That's correct.
And thus, by going to 2, you want to be able to get the cars off Hanley. I think that's a good idea. My fear is that as much as you're looking at your drive-through arrangement, I don't see how you get a car to your parking lot that wants to be a walk-in customer, and thus back to a problem on the main road.
But we have data that indicates the number of customers actually on like a 15-minute basis and going through the drive-through lanes, and you can take that existing data and even extrapolate it for maybe additional sales because of the improvements, and it still doesn't predict that there'll be stacking of 2 lanes of traffic out on Hanley.
So you should then always have an opening to get into your parking lot.
In fact, I think CBB even looked at that possibility and was not concerned.
Okay. Thank you, sir. No other questions.
Any other questions? Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, a question for Lisa, if I could borrow you for one more second, please. Sorry. Hey there, Lisa. So it appears to me on the plan, the proposal is basically borrowing space from the parking bay arrangement to the north, making that a little bit, I guess the drive lane between the parking areas is narrower now. My question is, I looked in the memo, I didn't see, do we have a minimum width between parking bays for a drive-through lane like that?
So, yes, we do. Those spaces there, I think they're more like about 60 degrees. But it would be, for one-way traffic flow, it would be a minimum of 18 feet.
And do we know what it ends up to be with this plan? Is it on?
So I would have, that's what I was doing with the plan there, was to scale that to see what that distance is.
But is that something you guys, they would have checked before in planning and zoning? Is that something that would have come up before? I just didn't see it or know about it.
Yeah, we should have made sure that that dimension was on there just to
It's clearly 1
verify
inch,
that,
which
but-
would be 20 feet.
Okay.
Actually, you did. It's on there.
Okay.
It's on, I don't know what page number
Which
it
drawing
is,
is that?
but 5 of 15, it clearly shows 20 feet in between.
I think there was a narrow width of like 18, but
Right.
20 would be more than enough.
And what's our minimum again is
18.
18? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, back to the agenda here. Okay, for new business, we have item 12C, which, for the purposes of the board's discussion, would be 10F in your agenda on board docs. So, streetlights and citywide improvement. Let's see, what was on the consent agenda was a proposal to move forward with streetlight additions pursuant to a recommendation from the Public Works Department. So I'm going to take this under, well, would somebody give me a motion to adopt the plan as submitted by the Public Works Department?
Motion to adopt the plan as submitted.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the board adopt the plan as submitted by the Public Works Department. Discussion, starting with Alderman Leahy. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'm a little confused with this bill, and I'm going to question a couple of things that are going on. And I guess my best question would be to the city attorney. In the suggestion of putting in extra lighting, we have an area of the York Woods Group. It is my understanding that the York Woods is under its own subdivision and its own indentures, that the city does not own the streets, nor does the city have any right-of-ways through York Woods. So I'm curious how we can use public money in a private institution area to work with, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that something of this nature would have to go through their indentures, and the trustees would charge the residents of that area for putting something like this in. And I'm not sure that any of that's been discussed with York Woods. So my question to the city attorney is, am I misreading what a private indenture is for this subdivision? And can the city do this without having to adjust things?
Can I let me intercept that question real quick. Alderman Lockmiller, this came through your committee. Was there any discussion of this topic?
No, it didn't.
I hate to point fingers, but it came.
But, sorry, Alderman Plufka, this came through your, sorry, I should have.
That's okay.
Was there any discussion of this during your committee's?
There was.
Okay.
And I don't want to give a legal opinion, and I'm interested to hear what our city attorney has to say with regard to the question by the alderman, but I would just say that from a public policy standpoint, this has nothing to do with streets. Just because we own our streets, let me finish, just before we own our streets, and the city doesn't own our streets, doesn't mean we're any less entitled to have them lit in a public and a safe way as everybody else in the city of Brentwood. We pay taxes like everybody else in the city of Brentwood in our subdivision, and we're no less entitled to the same public safety protection that you enjoy with the streets and with the lights and all of that. This is not a street issue. This has nothing to do with the maintenance of the street. This has nothing to do with the replacement of that street, which we're, and I'm speaking as a resident of York Village. We have, this is not that issue. This is a public safety issue. And that's what it's been talked about since its inception. And to differentiate, because York Village and York Village, though all of York Village, it exists where the streets are still owned and maintained by the residents, that somehow we're less entitled to the lighting protection that's been provided to the rest of the city is, I think it's a specious argument, to be honest with you. But I'm interested to hear what the city attorney has to say with regard to its legality.
Well, I bought you as much time as I could.
Yeah.
Mr. City Attorney, we're all waiting with bated breath to hear your opinion on this subject.
Well, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I have not read the indentures for the area, so I can't speak to what authority the subdivision trustees exercise over it. I can address the question of whether this is a public expenditure for private benefit, and street lights, or lighting along streets, however you leave me out of that argument, are clearly serve a public purpose. They are a safety installation. I am not at all troubled that placing public illumination in a private subdivision serves a public purpose.
Alderman Leahy.
I'm now more confused. When we addressed this issue back in February of this year, when I raised an issue with this board to help fund a potential program to improve the safety of the schools inside the city of Brentwood, and included St. Mary Magdalene's as one of them, I got an argument from the alderman from Ward 1 that I was using public money for private improvements for safety. But I was told we couldn't go down that road. Now I'm doing the same public money for the private institution of York Woods, but for safety, I get to do it for the lighting. In this bill of the putting in the lights, we are looking at a potential of putting the lighting underground To do that, I have to have right-of-ways. No, Mr. Plufka, you're correct. The streets are not the issue. It is the right-of-ways. The city has no right-of-ways in York Woods that I'm aware of to work with. I'm not opposed to improving the safety. I'm questioning whether you can do public money in a private institution. For doing the improvement of the schools, we were told no, but to do public money for the private institution for lighting and safety, you're telling me we can do this. So I'm getting two different interpretations of how this plays. Can we get a clearer understanding of whether or not it is permissible? How would that best be accomplished?
Well, first, I don't recall the question last spring, and I believe you were indicating that it was one of your fellow aldermen who opined as to whether or not it was a permissible expenditure, not me. So while your debate may be may properly be more properly directed to someone else rather than me, the question I was asked a moment ago
Yes, sir.
is whether use of public funds to install lighting in a residential neighborhood with private streets, whether that violated the Missouri constitutional prohibition against expenditure of public funds for private benefit. The law in interpreting the Missouri constitutional provision is that if there is a public benefit, and there is incidental private benefit, the public benefit is sufficient to warrant the constitutional expenditure of public funds. Streetlights are a public safety element. I am totally comfortable with that. If asked to opine, a court would conclude that it is a constitutionally valid expenditure of public funds. Now, your question as to whether or not there are easements or rights of way within which the construction can take place, I have not explored that issue and cannot opine on that.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask that this, I guess it's a resolution. My system shut down.
Well, so what I did is, that's why I asked for the motion at the beginning. So,
Yeah.
right, so the motion is to adopt the plan set forth by the Public Works Department as submitted in the agenda. So if you would like to make a change to that, I would suggest just making a change to the plan or amending the motion to adopt the plan subject to a condition or whatever you want to do.
I would love to amend what is being presented. I'm not opposed to putting lighting up to help improve the safety of the city of Brentwood, but I don't think our cost and the way we're going about it has been fully explored in this particular subdivision area. Thus, I'd love to have a chance for the city to look into that and to verify how best to accomplish what is being proposed, because I think you will run into right-of-ways, just like we did trying to get the sidewalks into the different walk places that we were doing. And we incurred a lot of additional expenses for those right-of-ways to work with. I would also like, at this time, to ask, well, let's get this motion taken care of. We'll have new business coming up on the other. But I'd like to make that motion that the city investigate if the underground light wiring and everything can be accomplished without having to procure.
Well, let me make a suggestion.
right-of-ways.
I think
You've got
we would be
additional
better served to take that
Postpone?
as a motion to send this, to refer this to committee for specific things to be done or something along those lines. That way, we wouldn't have to get into specifics here.
I would like to request then that
But I think Alderman Dimmitt has something he'd like to add to the discussion before we.
I'll hold. Yep.
Well, I'm gonna, sorry, Plufka. Thank you.
I do too, but that's okay.
Oh, you do? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I do.
I apologize. So, well, actually, Alderman Plufka's already had a chance. Would you like to go and?
Sure. It's not related to the York Woods issue, though. It's just the lights in general. Is that okay, Mr. Chairman, or do you want to know?
Yeah, I think the motion is for the entire plan. So
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and this might be to Director Gummersheimer, but we had been requested, Alderman Plufka and I, regarding the lights on Parkside, that they be installed in the island, the city's island. I was just wondering if, I'd never heard back, where are we on that issue? Is that where the light's going to end up going? So there'll be two in there at the ends of the islands. Okay.
And while we're offering comment on this subject, I can no longer restrain myself. I have to tell you that I have a tremendous issue with the fact that we have decided that 6 lights will not be installed due to the objections of some residents. And I got to tell you, look, folks, if your argument is these are for public safety, then I see no reason to deny public safety to those people because a few people object. That makes absolutely no sense to me. So I'm sorry, I just had to say that, and now Alderman Plufka, I'll let you.
So I can speak to that, and I can speak to the right-of-way issue as well, Your Honor. Thank you. In every single instance, and Mr. Gummersheimer will back me up on this, he has bent over backwards, and his staff has bent over backwards to come to some common understanding. And the Parkside Street is a good example where they've gone to the residents and asked them for input, and where lights had been initially put or suggested, they've been moved in a number of instances, not just in York Village, but in a number of places. So to your issue, Alderman, with regard to the right-of-way, this is going to be done with permission of the property owners. If the property owners don't give permission for this to be done in York Village, it's not going to get done. I mean, we've already talked about that. That's part of what we've already talked about. To the issue about leaving off the 6 where there had been some objection and voiced, I share with you that same exact concern. And so we did not agree to just leave them off permanently, but instead indicated by our committee action that we would proceed with the ones where there was consensus and come back to those at a later time, because, as you point out, just because somebody who lives there at this moment in time says, I don't want a street light, doesn't really necessarily solve the question or answer the larger question.
Alderman Wege.
Yeah, so, thank you, Mayor Thornton. Thank you, Mayor Thornton, for the comment. I agree. So, these rejections don't reflect the conversations I've had with people that live in the cul-de-sac. So normally it was one person who sent the postcard back in. In one of these, they claim that their neighbors were not in favor of it. I've talked to those neighbors. They are in favor of it. So after our ward meeting, I actually had 2 residents who were against the street lights email me the next morning and say, when I got home that night, because our ward meeting goes for like hours and hours, it's awesome. But they said it was actually really dark, and now I think it would be a good idea to put the light in.
And my neighbors attacked me in the dark and beat me until I agreed to put
Well, one of the people objecting had their car stolen out of their driveway once. But anyway, so that's neither here nor there. So I really appreciate public safety not kind of giving up on these. I guess my only question would be, maybe 2 questions. Is there an inefficiency gained by doing this in tranches of lights instead of just having the whole plan going forward? And second, how are we going to, get past, the quasi-rejection going forward? I mean, I would certainly volunteer to go around the Ward 2 and, do a house-by-house signature, drop a red stone in the bag if you want it, and a black one if you don't, kind of thing. I guess
my comment was addressed on a broader issue, right? I mean, people don't get to vote whether police patrol their streets. We patrol their streets, right? I mean, it's so in some sense, I understand that we need to be sensitive to people's individual concerns, but in the other,
I agree with that, but at the same time, if all the residents don't want it, why push a rope in and spend money, right? So, but I think we should, I would just like a clearer path to get an answer, and if there isn't an inefficiency, so I think that maybe that's the dam, but, if we can do it with tranches like we are, and that's fine, we're not going to, incur an additional cost by trying to do it next time, we don't think those are at risk, then it would probably be very helpful to walk all the residents over to one of the cul-de-sacs that wants it and say, this is what we're talking about, not a Cobra head light that's 30 feet tall, not a, because there's been a lot of misthought about that. So those are all my only questions, but I am supportive of going forward with this plan.
Alderman Lockman.
I was wondering if maybe we could have Dan come on up here and kind of give an explanation, because if I'm reading the recommendations correctly, the 6 that are marked no on here are not eliminated, but just put on hold.
Right. Yeah.
And the other 6 that have been listed on York are not necessarily going through, they're just proposed at this time. So we're just doing the yeses. Am I reading that right?
That is true. Thing on at the bottom. Test.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah, the 6 that were postponed, we would not put in the RFP. They weren't, they're rejected for now, but if you want to explore them later, we figured we'd at least do the ones that had positive feedback or no feedback. Some people didn't even, respond via email, via whatever. They just didn't respond. So we took it as a yes.
Silence is consent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there were some very vocal, and one of them, I forget which, maybe it was Barnstable, it was split, 3-3. It's like, well, how do you address that? Some want it, some don't.
Knife fight.
Yeah. And most of them, the reason why they gave is they don't want the light entering their living rooms or whatever. They would prefer to just turn on a porch light than to have a street light that's on a dusk to dawn.
All right. Other questions while Dan's up here? All right, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Alderman Kramer.
Just a comment, Your Honor. There is apparently a precedent going back in time regarding Alderman Leahy's concerns and Alderman Plufka's comments regarding the overriding importance of public safety. My recollection is that there are some areas of the city that have private or non-public thoroughfares that do have lighting installation, dusk to dawn type. In Brentwood Forest, I can recall a couple locations that were mounted on existing infrastructure. But the question that came up at the time was, who is going to pay the light bill, the electric bill for those particular items? And I recall the determining factor at that time was if this lighting improvement for public safety was concerned to be installed on an otherwise non-public area, that the light bill would go to that authority granting the permission for that light area. And thus, I believe Brentwood Forest does pay, for example, the bill on the lighting locations that were installed for public safety that aren't on a public road. Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
All right, Alderman Leahy. We seem to, sorry, man, we can't have public discussion at this point. You'll get a chance later in the agenda. Alderman Leahy.
It is my request to ask that we get a further clarification on how best to proceed with accomplishing this when we deal with the private entities to work with. And thus, I'm asking, I guess, for either a postponement of a vote or to give the city staff or city attorney a chance to research into it.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as a motion for indefinite postponement, right? So that would mean that we would postpone a vote on this until a time which is unknown but in the future.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll take that as a motion for that. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we postpone the approval of this plan for an indefinite period of time. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone?
This is not going back to committee, just being postponed.
Well, I presume once it's postponed, the committee could kick it around or whatever, and we could vote to bring it back onto the agenda.
I sent the city administrator an email this morning with the questions that I have asked in order to help clarify this issue. It is my hope that the staff will have a chance to address those concerns.
Alderman Kramer.
And, Your Honor, there is a side note. Director Shaw came to us at the Public Safety Committee meeting and talked to us about the funding for this would be coming, I believe, from 2019. And thus, if we did anything before
2018.
2018.
It's Prop P funds from 2018.
So there's something about when we had to spend the money, if we could do a budget adjustment, a budget amendment, or...
So the funds have been allocated for this year, and we're in the middle of having a meeting next week with Ways and Means, and we are proposing funds, how to spend the Prop P money for next year. I believe that if you look at the memo that Dan Gumersheimer presented in your packet, it talks about the cost of this project, which is $213,000. So that amount of money will not be available from Prop P in 2019. Therefore, if the board chooses to postpone this indefinitely, then we would be directed to find other means to pay for this.
That was my point, Your Honor, that that there is a timing question.
Time is of the essence.
Time is of the essence, So therefore.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and ask it for you because I'm sure it's the same question I have. So if we don't spend this money in 2018, we just can't carry it over into 2019? Yeah, sure.
Well, it will roll over. It will.
It's not a use it or lose it kind of deal.
No, I mean, that will roll over into fund balance, so we'll start to create fund balance in this line item.
If we don't physically take possession of the light poles and get a bill in 2018, it won't come out of 2018 budget.
Right.
It'll be 19, and just what Bo said,
Right.
go in fund balance.
And the fund balance will go up by $200,000.
That's correct,
And then
and
we'll.
then it would be.
So, so we're not using it or losing it or anything like that.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good clarification.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so
Alderman
are
Demming.
we dealing with this motion?
We
or
are
vote
not
on?
dealing with the motion to postpone. If there's discussion on the motion to postpone.
I would like to say something. I think we've waited long enough to have these lights installed. It has been years, and to postpone this any longer so that we can look into this issue of a right-of-way, I think that can be done simultaneously. We could still go ahead and approve the purchase and installation of these lights, while at the same time, the city attorney or whoever needs to look into it on this issue of the right-of-way. But to hold up the installation of lights for the vast majority of these simply to deal with 5 lights doesn't seem to be something that our residents want.
Alderman Leahy.
Well, I appreciate David's concern, but I'll ask the question. Assuming that we get these things installed and York Woods finds out that we hold to the policy that we've held Brentwood Forest to, and now York Wood gets the monthly billing for turning these lights on, what do you think your residents in York Wood are going to say when they get this bill? And nobody has brought it back saying, hey, this is a potential. Because I think we are dealing with what's the full policy. I don't think we should treat Brentwood Forest and York Woods differently. And I think if we're headed down this road and we're turning on lights and stuff, is the city going to be picking up the full cost for running all these lights? Thus, we haven't appropriated the cost of Brentwood Forest lights coming in here and working through. And if we go into construction to put lights in at York Woods and find that we do have a right-of-way issue, are we telling staff that if it incurs costs that it doesn't do the lights at all because nobody gave permission to do it? I think these things should be answered before we start spending money. I think that's a fair way to proceed.
Alderman Dimmitt.
Well, I'm still not sure what we're talking about. Are we talking about right-of-way, or are we talking about payment of the bill for the power for those lights? I mean, you're interchanging these things. You know, right-of-way, that can simply be determined by having our city attorney look at that.
And I'm gonna ask you guys, we've kind of moved away from postponement, right? So the discussion should.
I think this still is.
There's still, okay.
Yeah.
Well, because if the motion to postpone fails, then we're still gonna have a vote on the motion to proceed with this, which would be back into the discussion I think you're having, so.
Well, I just want to make sure that, my position is we don't need to postpone this to have a determination whether York has to pay for the utility bill or whether there's some issue on the right-of-way. That can be done. We can go ahead still and approve this list of the lights and simultaneously get the answer to the questions that Alderman Leahy has.
Okay, I'm gonna take the silence as end of discussion, and I'm sorry, Alderwoman O'Neill, apologize.
Thinking here. Is it possible, rather than indefinite, to postpone this until our next meeting?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Can staff? work
Alderman
through
Leahy,
this
it's your
and-
motion, would you amend your motion thus?
If staff can accomplish the task within that time frame, I think that would be marvelous. I will be agreeable to amending to a 2-week period.
How about if I recommend to you that it become a motion to postpone until December 3rd?
Acceptable, Your Honor.
Okay, so is everybody clear? The motion has become a motion to postpone until December 3rd. Now, just to make sure, is there any further discussion on the motion to postpone until December 3rd? Very good. By show of hands, all in favor of the motion to postpone this item until December 3rd, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed to the motion to postpone until December 3rd, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All the mayors that want to leave the room, raise your hand. Yeah, I haven't given this a whole lot of thought, folks.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I understand that the motion to postpone was predicated upon a scope of items that the staff would cover. Do they understand what that scope is?
Well, I think I've got a pretty good idea.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I'm not sure that there's going to be sufficient answers gathered in even 30 days to get to the point where that's the case. I honestly, folks, I don't see any reason that we can't proceed with the project and tackle the problems as they come. Let's look. I think at the end of the day, and like I said, I hadn't given this one any thought prior to the meeting because it was on the consent agenda. Thought we were just going to vote and go. So I got to tell you, my honest opinion is at the end of the day, we aren't going to be spending money on things that aren't there. I am very interested in what our policy is with respect to, paying for the lighting itself. But frankly, with these LED lights, the electricity cost is minuscule. So I don't think that's a substantial concern to the ongoing running of the lights. So I am going to break the tie. I'm going to vote against the motion to postpone. And so the motion is back on the table. So we go to the main motion, which is to proceed with the plan as presented by the Public Works Department. Is there any further discussion on that motion, the main motion? Okay, so we're ready to vote on that one as well, and since we don't have to do, well, actually, this one probably does have to be by roll call because it's money. So I'm going to ask for a roll call. A vote in favor is to proceed, a vote against is to not proceed.
Your Honor, this is just the installation of the lights.
Yeah, this is just the installation of the ones that are outlined by Dan in the spreadsheet as being yes,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
And the other ones are just proposed. So my understanding is we won't even be doing anything in York Woods at this point, and we won't be doing anything on the streets where people have had objections. So
This motion is to continue with the plan. The RFP with the actual cost for the lights would still come back through the board.
that's right. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this is, a little bit of a tempest in a teapot, yes. All right, very good. So by roll call vote, all in favor of proceeding as planned, let's have a roll call. Yes is voting to proceed as planned.
Alderman Demmett.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy.
No.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill. Alderman Plufka.
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
And Alderman Wiggy.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and issue that RFP, Dan, and get on it. Very good. Item number 12D is the one that I pulled off of the consent agenda, and I will promise to be quick about it. I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt Resolution 1117, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board adopt resolution number 1117. Like I said, I just want to take the time to explain to the board what this is about because it came up very quickly, and I did add it to the agenda very late in the day today, so I don't want to be accused of slipping one past the goalie. This is what I mentioned to you several weeks ago, probably maybe 6 weeks ago, with respect to an independent auditor to audit the operation of the COP funds and the funds that are being expended for the Brentwood Bound project. Director Shaw went out and got 3 proposals from some certified public accounting firms. She's had a chance to review those proposals. She sent them to me for review as well, and to City Administrator Conde. The proposals came back. There was actually a surprisingly wide variance, but I think that's due to the sort of unique nature of the job. The intent, folks, is to have an independent audit function that reports directly, it reports to and is accountable to this board and only to this board with respect to how the monies are spent on the Brentwood Bound project. We're dealing with an awful lot of money. We're dealing with an awful lot of complicated things, and I think it just behooves us to be as positive as we can be that all of those monies are being, firstly, appropriated according to procedure and so forth, and then second of all, actually spent according to procedures and so forth, and then finally to make sure that what is purportedly done is actually done on the behalf of the citizens. So that is the intent of this ordinance. I think the recommendation to adopt the proposal from KE&B is a very good one. I think that they're a very good firm, and they're also independent of any other function that's going on in the city, so their only experience with us will be in the nature of this project, which I think is great. And they're a big enough firm that if one person leaves who's working with them, they can pick up the slack, and they can last with us through this entire project. And I think they evidence that by the fact that they bid it for a 3-year period, knowing that it would be at least 3 years that this project's going on. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on what we're doing. I think the costs are relatively minimal, and I think it's a very good proposal, and I just wanted to, like I said, make sure that you all knew that it was coming to fruition and what we were spending to get it done. So is there any further discussion on that motion? All right, well, I didn't think you'd be against it, but like I said, I wanted to make sure that you all knew what it was. So with that, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Demmett.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy.
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderman Plufka.
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Wiggy.
Yes. All right, great. We will hire KE&B to do that, and like I said, I think it's going to work out great for the city. Item number 13 on the agenda is citizens' comments. If you have any comments that you'd like to make to your Board of Aldermen, if you'd come to the podium and state your name, we'll give you at least 3 minutes to talk on any subject you like. Mr. Nuremberger.
Hey, John. Microphone, here it comes.
I just wanted to make sure that we have lights so they're going to be not as bright as what's on McKnight and going down Listener, I'm sorry. Not as bright as they are. They were really bright to me. Thank you.
They're different.
Good, John.
Anyone else? Ma'am?
My name is Mary Helen Moss. I live on Parkside Drive, and we've talked to both Alderman Plufka and Alderman Dimmitt about the lights on the street. They were going to put one in front of our house, which we told both Alderman Plufka and Dimmitt that we do not want right in front of our house. We do not have a sidewalk, so it would be on our property. Our suggestion was to them that they put either in the center of the park or on each side of the park. There's a little park in the center of the street. That would, and everybody around the street puts the lights on their houses. So we really have no objection, but we thought if you want to light at the park, put the lights on one side of one end of the park and the other end of the park. And that was our suggestion. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, is anyone else care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen? Seeing none. Anyone from the Board of Aldermen care to respond to any of the comments? Seeing none. Let's see.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that we're at item 15. There is no closed meeting suggested, so I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second?
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Nope.